Hey guys, and welcome to Devlog 6 of the Animal Behavior Kit. Today we'll take a quick look at the breeding system that I've been working on for the past week or so. Hopefully you saw the teaser video. I've done some more progress since then, but the system is not done yet. There's still a few bugs that I'm still trying to figure out. So hopefully, as we're going through this, we don't see too many things go wrong. But I do want your opinion, by the way. I'm trying to think of good games, good examples that I can kind of copy or emulate to come up with my breeding system. So I'm gonna show you what I have so far, but I really want your feedback. If this is something that you're really interested in, or if you have a good examples of games that do this really well, please let me know. Because it's still again very early on, and I'm trying to come up with the best system possible. There are so many different ways of doing this that I want to make sure that I do something that's actually usable. So the first thing I want to showcase is some quick information about the general ground animal ponds here. And you'll see that obviously there's a bunch of details, including the mesh, etc. There's a behavior, whether you use the need system or not. But there's some information here under animal details. And you'll see that there's an animal name. That's what displays here on the term name. So in this case, it's buck. There's sex for the animal, that's male or female. In this case, this is male. If I click here, you'll see that she's female, doe is female. And there's a species field here. This is just like a tag, a name. But this is very important because these are the main fields that I'm using to make sure that the animals find each other, right? So I've been trying to make the system more modular. So instead of adding all of this functionality right here on the class, I've added an actor component called BP comp look for mate. And if you see down here, I already added it here. If I click here, you'll see that there's a bunch of different options here. You can have them actively search for a partner. And then you have the frequency. In this case, this guy's going to look for a partner every 20 seconds, and you can specify a radius. This is very similar to the way I'm doing the predators looking for food when they get hungry. If you recall that video, I do a giant sphere trace, and then whatever's in there, then I look and see if there are potential partners. So that's the most efficient way I can think of. If you have like a massive world, you don't want an animal in one corner of the world trying to mate with somebody on the other corner, right? That doesn't make sense. So what I do is on this frequency, every 20 seconds, it'll create a massive trace. It'll look for animals that have the same species, and that's why it's important in this case, anything that has the tag deer as species, and then it'll look for a different sex, right? So this guy's gonna look for deer that are female. And only then will it then at that point choose the closest one. If there's two male bucks, obviously they won't do anything, or two female does, they won't do anything. So it'll have to pass through all this categorization, and then it'll pick the closest potential partner. And that's what you saw in the video. And obviously in this case there's only one, so I'll just find her and just go to her. There's obviously some debug functions here. Then there's some breeding settings here. Breeding timer, this is how long will the breeding or the mating ritual last, right? So you see when the little hearts come up, you can configure that. In this case, it'll last about 5 seconds. You can make this last longer, or if you want them to last like 1 second, right? Whatever you choose is in seconds. This is the hearts location, the little particle system where you want it to pop. And then there is an equal chance, a 50% chance of the child or the offspring to be male or female. And then if it is male, you can specify the name for the male and the mesh. Or if it's female, you specify the female name and the mesh. And then you have a few options here. In this case, the default is you want only the male to look for a mate, not the female. So in this case, this is the male. And you can see here that this is active. It's going to actively search for a mate. The female in this case, if I go down here to the look for mate comp, you'll see that the active search is disabled. And you don't have to do that. Obviously, you can have both, male and female look for each other. Or if you have a species of animals where you want the female to look for the male, that's perfectly reasonable. You can change the frequency that each sex looks for another one, and the radius, obviously. But in this example, The females is going to be running around. The male will be the one looking to pair, and then if it finds her, it'll go there and it'll breed. So, and in this case, it's every 20 seconds. So if I click play here, and you'll see if I try to debug, you see at the top there says biggest need is roam. So he's just roaming around. As soon as the timer hits 20 seconds, you'll see at the top, you'll see the biggest need change from roam to breed, and then it'll go to the mate. There you go. And you'll see the little hearts pop up, and then an offspring will appear. And in this case is another male buck, and this guy is gonna basically do the exact same thing. As I follow him and I try to debug him, you'll see the same thing. He is roaming right now. That's his biggest need. And then in about 20 seconds, he'll then try to look for a mate. And of course, while this guy's roaming around, the original buck is obviously mating with the doe here. So that's all fine and dandy. In this case, there's too many males, so they're all kind of ganging up on her. It's really funny. I've had other instances where it's all females and it's just one buck going crazy in all the females. It really is just random. And you can see this guy just came over and just found the nearest doe, and then they're just doing their thing. Okay. Cool. So that's simple enough. There are other cases. Obviously, you can change the settings here. In this case, they're doing, every 20 seconds. I have an example here of the bears. Here, because I don't have different meshes for the male and female bears, what I did is I just changed the names to literally male bear and female bear, and the mesh is exactly the same. And in this case, these guys are only looking for each other every 45 seconds. So again, you can change depending on the species, of course. You can make sure that they do different things. And in this case, they're just roaming around, both of them. And I'm going to go for the male bear here again. And in this case, you see that this guy, whoops, not this guy right here. All right, there we go. You'll see that his biggest need is roam, and his engage behavior is ignore, which is why I'm not interfering there. And then as soon as the timer hits 45 at the top, he'll try to search for a mate, and if he finds her, then he'll go and do its thing. And you can see there exactly at 45, his biggest need changes to breed. They go there, little hearts fly out, and then they pop a little offspring. And on it goes. There's also the option of having more than one offspring. So this is the case for the spiderlings that I have here. If I go for look for mate and I'm going to activate the male, in this case, these guys are only going to look for each other every 60 seconds. However, if you look at the settings for the female will have, you see at the bottom here, a random, random offspring between 4 to 12. Let's change this to like 8 to 12, just to make it more interesting. So these guys, every time they copulate, the female will have between 8 to 12 spiders, and it's going to be a random number. And obviously you can change this. So obviously this works great for like rabbits, spiders, any kind of critters. So let me do this to speed things up. I'm going to use the follow camera, and I'm going to follow the male spider here, and I'm going to activate it. And this is going to go at 4 times the speed, so we don't have to wait here for 60 seconds. But you can see that they're just roaming around, and in about 60 seconds, obviously a lot quicker, the male is going to look for the female, and you'll see that now they can pop between 8 or 12 spiderlings. And you can see because of, some of them are actually outside because they're trying to spawn so many, and it's trying to adjust the location. So obviously if we keep this going, this is gonna, as you can see here, there's too many spiders going on, and my computer is gonna start to lag. And even some of the spiders are there with the deer now because they overflowed. So obviously the question becomes, all right, so I have a bunch of spiders that are just popping up. How do we control the population, right? And this is one of the, we were joking around on the YouTube comments, and obviously, the one of the ways that you can do that is you can have predators hunt the prey, right? So if you have bears, if I just make these guys together, take this wall out and have them attack each other, obviously the bears will hopefully start killing some of the deer, and then the deer in some other part of the world are going to start breeding, and then somehow the population gets balanced. But there are other ways that you can do that. So what I've done is I've created a new actor component, and I call it component natural death. And all this is literally a time to live variable. And in this case, I have 600 seconds, but I'm going to make it, let's say 1 minute, 60 seconds, right? And I'm going to do the same thing for her, 60 seconds. And this is literally just a timer, right? Let me just take the follow camera and disable it. And this is just a timer, right? So that's one way that you can call the population. Every 60 seconds, this guy's gonna die of old age. So he'll have 3 opportunities to mate, and then he'll die, more or less. And of course, what you can do, let me just show that, is you have the option of including the same component on the children. So you can come here and say, okay, for the males, you also want to add the natural death component, and for the females, you also want to add the natural death component. And we're going to come here and select the same thing. So now what happens is that they're all going to get the same component. If I take the follow camera, let me just select this guy here. Whoops. Activate him. He's going to do his thing. He's going to go around and start mating. And we're just going to follow the buck here. He has a little timer again that he's going to eventually die of old age. And you can see here that he is dying. Whoops. Eject. And the same thing is happening, right? So the 2 original deer died out of old age, and the same thing keeps happening here. So that's one option, is to have them, die out of old age, and you can certainly do that. And we can add it the same here, old age, and we're going to leave it at 600. And can come here and select it as well. And then basically this will self-regulate the population, right? Obviously here is very obvious because they're all in the same place. But if you have a massive world, you want to be able to dictate a time to live for each animal, right? And obviously it won't even be, 10 minutes or whatever. You can make it, 20 in-game minutes if you wanted to. You can calculate that in seconds, or maybe 10 minutes, or you don't have to use that at all. But if you're using the breeding system, you should have a natural way of killing the animals in some way. Otherwise, some of the populations can get pretty crazy. So that's one way, and that's a very simple way without a lot of control. So I've come up with a more sophisticated way, and this is a blueprint I call population control, BP population control. And what this blueprint does is it looks at all of the animals in your world, and it tries to keep a certain target per animal species. That's pretty cool as well. So what is very simple on the setup, you either have it active or not, and then you include a tag list. And this tag list is going to be basically the species of the animal. And for each tag, you can specify the maximum number of animals of that tag. Right, so in this case, we don't want to have more than 4 deer in the world at a time. We don't want to have more than 2 bear at a time, or more than 10 spiders at a time. And then you can select the check frequency here, and we're going to go ahead and leave that as a debug. Just understand this is a very expensive operation because it's basically gathering all of the actors in the scene of each tag. So it's doing this 3 times. So you don't want to have the frequency very low. You might want to do this, in a real game, like maybe every 30 seconds, every minute, and that'll just kind of make sure that your animals don't get too out of hand. But in this case, I'm going to do it every 5 seconds, and just to keep it interesting, I'm going to change the bears here. Instead of 45 seconds, I'm going to make this 20 seconds, and I'm going to do it here as well, just so you can see what happens with the bears. And I'm just going to click play. I'm going to take the follow option out, and we're just going to click play here. And now every 5 seconds, we're going to have our population control go through the scene and check out if there are any animals that need to be killed. And right now, remember, we have 2 bears that are only allowed to exist in the world. So after these guys copulate, you're going to see one of them is, going to die. Right? And and you see at the top left, immediately it says, well, there's one too many bears, and he just killed this guy right here. And he just killed this guy right here because, again, we are only allowed to keep 2 bears at a time. And if I go ahead and eject, and we go to the spiderlings, you're going to see that is something similar. This guy is dead because, again, the population control is making sure that that we keep them in check. There is one problem though, and it is not sure how I'm going to handle this. Is right now I'm not checking for the sex of the animal, so we could very well find ourselves, with 2 males or 2 females left in the case of the bears. And that basically makes the species extinct, right? Because they can't mate anymore. I don't know if I want to go to that level of detail, because that's going to make it a lot more complicated, right? Trying to not only balance the population, but try to balance the sexes, right? So maybe keep the same amount of males and females per tag. That's going to make it very complicated and very expensive. So I don't know yet what I'm going to do about that. But right now, in a real example, you're going to have a lot of bears in your scene, and hopefully as we're killing bears to keep the population stable, you're going to have a random number of males and females. But this is a problem, and I'm not sure how I'm going to fix it. And the same thing here, you can see that there's a bunch of spiders that are just dying because we're just constantly killing them. So if we were to speed things up, as a last demo here, we're going to make these guys mate every 20 seconds. That's absurd. And every time they mate, remember, they're going to have, the females are going to pop between 8 to 12. And I'm going to do a follow camera on this guy here. And we're going to speed things up, maybe to a 5, and just see what happens. And you'll immediately see there that one of the spiders immediately died. And again, we keep popping spiders and a bunch of spiders keep dying. That's because we're only allowed to have up to 10 spiders in the level, or whatever the number I specified there. So whatever excess spiders appear, they're going to be killed by the by the population control. So obviously this is a very absurd example, because you're never going to have this level of procreation, I guess. But if you ever wanted to do something like that, that's an excellent example. And of course, the animal that I was following died, which is why you got this error. So cool. All right, so that's all I wanted to show today. There's still some issues, like you said. What if 2 of the same sex remain? Then the species is basically over. I don't know what I'm going to do about that. And there are some little bugs. Funny enough, sometimes if a parent mates with a offspring, the offspring of those two will actually appear without a name, like a blank name for some reason. It's maybe it's the game telling me that incest is probably not a good idea. Who knows? But this is actually a real bug. It's hilarious when it happens. So I need to kind of hunt down the bugs and figure out what I need to do. But I did want to show you what I have so far. So right now, in the interest of keeping things modular, again, I'm trying to keep things in actor components, and I'm going to see if I can move some of that functionality, like the neat system, into a component as well. That way, ideally, you can build the behavior by dragging components into your actor. So yeah, basically the breeding system works by looking at nearby actors that are the same species and an opposite sex. If it finds them, it gathers all of the eligible partners and it looks for the closest one. Once they get close enough, they'll breed, and they'll pop one or many offspring depending on the settings that you put, and then the same thing will continue happening. You can enable natural death on the children, and then that's one way that you can make sure that each animal doesn't live longer than whatever amount of time you want. In seconds, that's the time to live. But if that doesn't do it, you can also use the population control blueprint, which is kind of a brute force approach. It just kills the excess population, right? And you saw the example here in the spiders. You can select how many per species are we allowed to have, and any amount that is above this amount will immediately get killed. And again, it's super obvious here because they're all nearby. But again, think about this as a normal scene in a massive world, without speeding things up to 5x. Then what the population control will do is probably kill one or two at a time just to try to keep the levels balanced, and it's not going to be as obvious to the player. So what do you think? Any issues that you see with this system? Any options that you like to see if you're using this for your game? Anything else? I'd love to hear your feedback on this. It's taken me a lot of time to get this working. There's a lot of bugs and moving parts, and I still have to make this work well with the rest of the needs system and everything else. So cool. Let me know what you think, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks, guys.